welcome to Tello Publishing. Today we have an amazing guest with us, author Terrance Buhr, and he has a 4-book series and he's currently working on the 5th book, and so we wanted to bring him on today to talk to him about how he decided to become an author, what it's been like with the writing process and publishing, and everything that we can learn from him and about his book. So we're just going to dive right in. So Terrance, and we have Maddie here. Maddie is our amazing editor and assistant and publishing guru, all things publishing. And so I'm really happy to have you here. And especially Maddie did the editing for Terrance's book.
And did an awesome job.
So I guess do you want to do a little intro for yourself as well? And then Terrance, will turn it to you to tell us all about who you are.
Oh, sure. Yes. So I'm Maddie Mortensen. I am married with a little baby son, and I just live in Hiram, Utah. And I love editing and everything involving books. So that's my passion. That's what I like to do.
Yeah. With a background
I graduated with English, with an English degree, an emphasis in creative writing. So.
Yeah, it's been amazing to have Maddie on the Tello Publishing team. She just knows her stuff, so it's great. All right, Terrance.
Okay, and I'm Terrance. I am a grandfather of 17 grandkids, and I have 4 children and a wonderful wife. When I graduated from high school, I had read maybe 1 book, and I would come, after being married, I would come home and I would catch my wife reading a book, and I'm going, why are you reading a book? It is such a waste of time, and it's beautiful outside. Why aren't you outside playing or this or that? And I just couldn't comprehend why anybody would want to put their nose in a book when life was happening around him. And she told me, she says, well, let me give you a book. You read it first and then decide. And I said, oh, okay. And I wasn't too excited about it. She gave me a book called Roots, and I read that. And there was a couple of days later, she got up in the night and noticed that I wasn't there, and she went out into the living room, and there I was, 3 o'clock in the morning, reading this book. And I didn't realize how you could go on a vacation in your living room or go to some other place in your living room. I couldn't comprehend that. And I started reading, and I read, and I've listened to books on tape when I couldn't be reading, and literally I have listened to and or read 1,000 books plus. And I enjoy reading very, very much. On some of the things that I've read and listened to, I said, I could write better than that. I'd never even tried it, but I go, this is a horrible book. I can't even believe that it's even published. And so with that in mind, and later on, I was thinking about my grandfather. Both of my grandfathers have passed away long since. I was 1 year old when my one grandfather passed away on my dad's side. And then I was 17 years old when my other grandpa died. And for those 17 years, he was an old man then. I had no clue what he would like when he was younger. I have really nothing. I talked to him, but I don't have anything I have some of his tools that he had and stuff like that, but that's really it. There's no story behind it.
No way to get to know him.
Yeah. And my other grandfather, I don't have anything. The only story I really know about him is that he was a good umpire, and people liked having him umpire games. That's really all I know about him. He was a farmer as well. And now when it comes to great-grandfathers, there I know absolutely nothing, or even further back, I have know nothing about them. And I thought that is really, really sad, because my great-grandfather had a life. He was young once. He fell in love. He got married. He had children. He had problems. He had joys. He had experienced life, and I know nothing about that. And I decided that I'm not going to do that to my great grandkids. All of them. I want them to have something that's me, and that they could at least know. And that's when the idea came of writing under. Some people say the main character, Cobb, they wonder, is that you? And I'm going, well, no, Cobb really isn't me. But a lot of his experiences, a lot of the things that are in the book are things that I've experienced in my life, either on the good side or the bad side of those things. The questions that Cobb had while he's growing up, he's 13 years old when this book starts. And the things that he goes through are things that I went through. The questions that he had are questions that I had. And as my kids read it, they see a little bit different of what their dad is through reading the book, even though in one way it doesn't have anything to do with me. And then my grandkids, all my grandkids have read it, except for the little baby ones. They haven't yet. And they enjoy it very, very, very much. So family loves it. And I wrote the book for them, and I had other people that would read it, and they go, this is really good, you should publish it. And I'm going, no, this is really just for my kids. And then I had one of my friends, a sixth grade teacher. He had read it to his class. He had what I had. He would read it to his class, and they would read it. And then I would go and talk to them about writing and answer whatever questions they had. And they loved it. They really, really loved it. And I would get notes from them. Thanks for coming in. I love your book. When it's a movie, I want to play this part. And out of every class that he read that to, that was the one thing. When this is a movie, I want to be this person. And it was fun for me to answer a bunch of the questions that the kids had about writing, and about another thing I would hear too quite a bit. It's like, I'm writing a book too. And I go, really? How much do you have done? He goes, well, it's only a page, but I'm writing a book. And then I would be excited for them, and I read it, and some of them were just like what my book started out as, so you could, but I was instilling in them an excitement that I got when I read Roots, about you can go on a vacation and not leave your living room.
Well, and I'm glad you brought it back to that, because I love like that whole journey you've been on, and like the idea that you didn't miss out on it. Like, we think about reading as such a youthful thing, that you do it as a kid, and all the books that I lost myself in as a kid, and the fact that you didn't have that experience, but then discovered it. And it was never too late. It's never too late to start reading, like, and to find that passion for losing yourself in these different worlds and stories and places. And what an incredible story of like what inspired you to write it. And I often work with business owners who want to write a book to cement their legacy, to leave something behind. And I've never thought about it in terms of a fiction book of like, that is your legacy. That's the way that your posterity can connect with you and know your story and the way you thought, just the way that the characters come out on the page. And that's so touching. Like yeah, that motivation behind it of I want to leave a legacy. I want to tell my story. And I think too, like about my grandpa died when I was 2 weeks old, and I never knew my other grandpa. And it's really important to know those stories and to have a connection to them. And I don't know that many people who would be like, I want to open up and tell my story so that people can remember me. So that's really cool. And then inspiring other writers.
Yeah.
I need to go back and find my very first. Well, I wrote like little kid books when I wrote a series called 30 Pounds Rules the Family about my little brother when I was in like 4th grade. But my first attempt at writing like a novel was probably in 7th grade. And I think it's still on my parents' computer. I need to go back and find it because I didn't finish it. I got to like chapter 3 and
Yeah, my old writings are in like just random notebooks or like my diaries when I was really young. So
Sadly, writing is harder than it sounds to be. It's I know that when I was writing, and then I would check, and just the dates that I had to keep track of was I had to go back and see what day this was and what day, and reread and find out that I was way off. My timing was off. I had to fix that. I remember one thing that in my mind, the story I'll tell you is that it happens underground in a compound that's underground. And at Cobb's time, it's 327 years have passed since they've been underground. And I was, in my mind had the compound a certain way, but when I read it, stuff like that, somebody read it, they go, well, this couldn't be, this is impossible to be when you have this. And I'm like, I gotta fix that, so I had to go back and do things like that I never thought of. That's really another part of the story, but you need to have it real, on that.
yeah. So what was the writing process like then? Did you, like you said, you had this picture of it in your head, but then once you got into it, you're exploring things, but did you know kind of what was going to happen in the story before you started writing? Or because I've talked to some authors, some are like the outliners, you've got to have a plan and you put it all in place, beginning to end what's going to happen before you start writing, which I feel like on the nonfiction side of things you need to have a plan. But then there's also on the fiction side, especially, they call them pantsers, like people who just kind of fly by the seat of their pants as they're writing, of just like, yeah. And like I've talked to authors, and I've even had this happen too when working on fictions books, where like the characters just do things, or like a new character just walks onto the page, and you're like, who is this person? And then they become like one of the main characters. And what was your process like?
I'm that way on that. I didn't have a plan, but I had an idea in my head of kind of what would happen. That idea and stuff got me this far. As I started writing, to me, what I do, which I think helped me in my writing and stuff, if I couldn't picture it in my mind happening, then it didn't happen. But if I could then picture it in my mind and look at it as if it is a movie that I'm watching, then it was very easy to write. And it was up to me whether I liked the movie or not. Yeah. And if I didn't like the movie, then I could change it. Very, very few times have I had to go and just cut out something totally on there. It's gone pretty well. All of the characters that have come in just sometimes walk on the stage unbeknown to myself, and I go, who is this guy? One thing that I have done, and I don't know the legalities of this, and but some of the names, you know, to think up names, like I have the hardest time coming up with making up a name. You'd think it would be simple,
Yeah.
but I had a lot of the names are people names that I know. Now, there's this one person in the book that's named Hank. Hank is a kind of a goofy person that you love, hate, irritated, put your arm around him because he's such a nice guy that you hope nobody sees you, you know, putting your arm around him. You know, that's Hank. I know people like Hank, and I didn't name the Hank, you know, so that the person I know like that is not Hank. But there's another girl that has a handicap that is very much a girl that I went to school with. She had a physical problem, and the way people treated her, and I remember feeling sorry for her. I was in 4th grade, and she was born without a chin, and she was smart, nice and stuff, but she talked funny and looked funny, and nobody treated her very nicely. I had just moved into the school. I moved from Alamosa, Colorado to Durango, Colorado, and it was during Christmas time. So in half the years gone by, and that's when I met her, and nobody treated her fine, she was playing jacks by herself, and I went over and I played jacks with her. Well, when I did that, first she wondered why
is someone being nice to me?
Why is somebody being nice to me? And how is this good? How are you planning on hurting me later from this, you know, type of setting me up? And when I showed her kindness, I lost friends because I spent time with her. And that hurt me horribly for being nice. And I'm always glad that my memory is that I've always treated her nicely.
Yeah.
I never ever treated her bad. I never called her names and such like that. But I got the brunt a little bit of just for being a friend to her.
Yeah.
And something that I would like to teach my kids is to be nice to other people that are different. And I wanted to teach them, well, I kind of put in there, not in the book, but in the cover, that I preach to my kids I teach them without preaching to them.
Yeah.
You know, so that in the story, I put that in the story form so that they can learn the lesson, but they don't feel like I'm teaching. You know, if I would have went in there and said, you need to be nice to other people. But if I write it so that they can see that, you know, it's so much better being nice to other people than not. And
that's some of the feedback you've gotten from people. That you were telling me a story the other day that somebody came up to you, that it was a grandparent who had read the book, and then they wanted to give the book to their kids because they're like, I just love the way that you teach these great values without blatantly coming out and being like, be nice, or whatever it might be.
That is, I've had a lot of, I wrote it for more of the kids type, but it's the grandmas and grandpas that have read my book that I get really honest, true feedback from them of how they enjoyed it. They can't wait till book 5 is done, and they want to know when it's done and why isn't it done already. And I've had a lot of them that have bought it for their children, grandchildren. And actually, I got a note today of a 9-year-old girl that's been wanting to read my book. And her mom was like, you know, I don't know, you know, I don't have a whole lot of money to be writing buying a book right now. And anyway, she sent me a text that she bought the first book today, and that my daughter's way excited. She's read the cover and stuff like that and was really wanting to know. 9 years old, that's kind of young, but I think she will be just fine. Another thing that I do that hear from a lot of parents, grandparents, and even the kids, but mostly moms, I'm so glad that your book is clean. There is nothing in there that I'm embarrassed about or would be embarrassed if my kids read it. And she said, or a lot of them say that isn't the norm out there. There are so many books out there that they put stuff in there that I don't dare have my kids read. And
I remember when I was in probably 7th grade again, I would go to the library and I couldn't find any books that I even caught my attention, because they all just seemed kind of there wasn't quality at that stage for that age group. And we also sent the book to lots of people as we were, working on editing it. We sent it out to beta readers, but we were like, we've got to get beta readers who are in the age group, not just anybody. It's got to be 10, 11, 12, 13-year-olds reading the book. And your brother,
my brother read it and he loved it. He was like, when can I get the rest of the series? And he went through it so fast, and he's like, when's the 5th book coming out? But it was nice because I could recommend it to him. And also a lot of my friends have younger kids and they're like, what are some good books? Because they know that I work with a lot of books, and they're like, where can we find good books that are clean for my kids? Because they're like, I can't find anything that isn't too scary for them, or that even just teaches principles that aren't, the kids are rotten to their parents, or other things like that, where it's just, they just kind of have junk in them.
Yeah.
And so I'm always like, you have to read the Under series because it's clean and it teaches good things. I love that Cobb, he just interacts with people in such an inspiring way. And I feel like the kids can really connect with him as a character. And so I loved that my brother was like, I can relate, because afterwards we asked him, what did you think about the book? What kinds of things did you like the most? And he was like, I loved Cobb. I loved the main character. I felt I could relate to him. And I just loved all of the characters and the way that they interacted. I mean, he just raved about it, which was so fun to hear. But I loved that I could, with good conscience, I could recommend it to anybody, and they all loved it.
Well, and especially for that genre, because I love dystopian novels and I love post-apocalyptic stories, but they are often zombies or violence, or the people are turning on each other, or all these just crazy, awful things that are going on. And it's nice to have to see that you can tell those stories without having the darkness there.
Doom and gloom.
The doom and gloom. Yeah. Having this positive outlook on humanity and our ability to deal with challenges, because there's always got to be conflict in a story. There's always got to be something that goes wrong, but it doesn't have to be Hunger Games, children killing each other.
Yeah.
Although I loved Hunger Games, but I read that when I was in college.
Right.
I never read that when I was younger.
Yeah.
Well, I think that a lot of times adults, I know that a 20-year-old, they kind of expect that in the books that they read, and I find that sad that they want to read that kind of stuff. I don't want my grandkids to read that. I don't want my kids to read that kind of stuff. And I really truly went out of my way to make this not only a clean book, but put a positive outlook on like you said, there's always troubles, and there's troubles in life as well. And you can either think, oh, the sky is falling and woe is me because of the troubles, or you can put a happy face on it and do the best that you can and make it a positive experience. And those people that learn how to do make it a positive experience, get so much more out of life than those that are running around thinking that the sky is falling. Yeah. And it's a lot about attitude. And I've tried to put that in there, that a better attitude.
Well, and I love, especially in the first book, that like he discovers this book of knowledge. We can't give away too much of the book, but like I love seeing Cobb's growth as he learns, that he goes like his journey, his character journey and arc is beautiful, because he starts like this point here and then experiences so much growth because of the knowledge that he gains and his understanding of like, oh, there's so much more to life. And I think that's why it's so relatable for kids, you know, that are your brother's age, because they're like they're at this stage of life where they're learning so much and kind of leaving behind the childish years of just like the world revolves around me, and there's so much to learn and so much to do and see, and that they see their life reflected in Cobb's story too. And feel empowered by this knowledge that they're gaining and not like overwhelmed by it.
Right. Yeah. And just his thirst for knowledge, where he is so excited to be learning. And I think, you know, just in society today, I feel like a lot of kids are like, oh, I have to go to school, I have to learn math and English, you know, like all these things. But it's so fun to see that where he has had a lack of it, it's fun to see his growth and excitement for the world out there. And I feel like that can really light a fire in these kids that read it, where they can have a new perspective of, oh, how would it be to not have, you know, this book of knowledge and not have learning, and then to all of a sudden have this whole world at your feet, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of brings me maybe to shift gears a little bit, because Maddie, you were the editor on the book. Yeah. And I've only like read bits and pieces and know what Terrance has shared with me, and I can't read every book that comes through, which I needed to sit down and read this one, because I'm like, I've heard so many good things about it, and what I've read I've loved. And I was just reading a little snippet of it the other day as I was publishing it somewhere, and I just wanted to keep reading. So right. Like this sweet exchange between Cobb and Chanel, and I was like, oh, I just want to read this right now. But from the editing relationship of like going in and looking at it, and how was that for you, having somebody go look at it? Because had you had somebody edit it before?
I edited it myself. My wife edited it. My daughter has edited it, and another daughter has edited it. And they all send me, you know, there's this mistake, this is misspelled, and I wonder why didn't I catch that? You know, my problem with editing my own book is I'm like you. I will get involved in reading it, even though I know what's going to happen, and I'm reading, and I am 3 pages later, and I didn't look for one mistake. Yeah. So it's very, very beneficial to, and I think my wife had the same problem, and my daughter had the same problem too, of reading and not doing what they're supposed to be doing. I was very, very grateful that somebody could actually read and edit and even, you know the story, but actually do the work. Of course, I paid you a lot more than I paid my wife. I didn't pay them anything at all. But what I did pay you, it was well worth it.
So glad. Although I will be honest, there were pages that I had to go back and reread the entire page to edit it, because I would get like swept away in the story, and then I'd be like, oh wait, I have to edit it. I'm editing, not reading. So it was beautifully written.
Yeah. Well, and I think you touched on a really important point, that like no matter how good of a writer you are, you always need at least another set of eyes, and a professional set of eyes to look at it. Because I remember the first book I wrote, they commissioned me to write it, and they're like, well, you're the editor for our website, you edit all of our content, like you should be able to just write a perfect book. And I was like, nope. This is 60,000 plus words, and it's a lot of stuff that I'm putting in there, and there's so many opportunities to make mistakes. And when it's your own work, you just see it differently, and you can't. It's very different to go into somebody else's work and look at it with a critical eye than to go into your own work, because you just miss things. And I was so mad they would not get an editor to proofread my book even. And they just put it out, and then I got a comment of like, oh, the editing's not as awesome. And I was like, yeah, you're right, because it didn't get edited. Like, even though it was written by an editor and I went through it multiple times, it's just not the same.
I think a lot of
having a
times
person.
you know what it's supposed to say, so that's what you see is
Yeah.
what it's saying,
Exactly.
and that's what you read, because your mind works that way.
Yeah, your eyes will skip over mistakes every time. I mean, if it's your own writing, like I found in my own writing, I'll just skip over stuff, and then if my mom looks at it, she's like, you made all of these,
How
like,
did you miss this?
you're an English major, like, how did you miss this? I'm like, I honestly didn't even see it. So
Sometimes I'll send things to my mom and she'll be like, well, you should think about this, this, and this. I'm like, that's exactly what I tell my clients. Like, why did I not tell that to myself? Because we just don't see our own work the same way as we see somebody else's. So for you, what was the editing process like then?
it was so fun. It was so fun to see, because I haven't worked as much with that, with books with that specific audience before, kind of that younger age. So I checked out a bunch of books for that age group.
We went to the library together.
We did. We went to the
looking
library.
at book covers and
Yeah, getting some inspiration for kind of that audience specifically, and kind of the writing style. But it was so fun to kind of read through the book. And at first I was kind of like, oh, well, we could change a lot of this stuff. And then as I got further into the book, I was like, well, no, that stuff's necessary. And like this stuff builds up to that. And I just got sucked into this, and I was like, you know what? It actually doesn't need as much editing, which is kind of why I try to be very careful with my editing, because the author always knows kind of what they want from the book, and they have this vision. I mean, it's your legacy. So I always try and be very careful, because books are personal. I mean, they're the soul, of the author oftentimes. And so it was fun to kind of get in touch with the kind of soul of the book, I guess. That sounds kind of funny, but to kind of see it on a deeper level. And so it was fun to kind of go through and edit, and I would kind of make suggestions of like, okay, the wording's maybe a little interesting here, like we could change that, or the dialogue, just making it sound more like less formal or kind of awkward. But it was also kind of fun because the characters oftentimes talked differently because they've been in this underground bunker. And so it was fun to kind of get into their heads and be like, no, they kind of talk like that, and so it was fun to kind of take on that challenge and not edit things just based on like, this sounds weird. It's like, oh no, this is normal for these people. What is the purpose behind how they're saying this or doing this? And so it was such a fun journey for me to edit it and try and keep the purpose of the book intact, but honor just
the integrity of the message.
Yeah, honor that, and then to just make it into a polished copy so that there weren't any grammatical mistakes or things like that. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, how did you feel about it, getting the feedback?
I was very, very grateful for it. When I get feedback from my wife, who is sweet and wonderful and was very, very helpful in so many ways, and encouragement stuff. But when it comes to editing,
that's not helpful.
Yes, she knew me too well, or what, I don't know, whatever it was, but to have her edit it, I probably won't ever have her edit anymore.
I took a course on songwriting in college, and the professor has like lots of songs on the country radio charts and things like that. And she said that at the beginning of her marriage, she would play her songs for her husband to get his feedback. She's like, I learned very quickly, I only have one husband. And I have lots of people who can be my critic. I don't want my husband to be my critic because he's the only one I've got of that. When I've got this whole like plethora of critics out there who can be reviewing my work and giving me feedback of, I don't want the dynamic of my marriage relationship to be one of criticizing something that I created and like pulled from my soul. And it's because, and that is something that, like, you know, we encourage people to get an alpha reader who reads it before you even send it to like an editor. And you can have a loved one do that, but it's often better if it's like somebody a little bit removed from you who knows you and is willing to do a favor, but not like someone close to you, because they're gonna struggle to give open and honest feedback.
But it is great if you need encouragement. That's why I send stuff to my mom half the time. I mean, she does have a critical eye when I need that, but she's like, "It's great, you're doing great." And I'm like, "Thanks, that's what I needed."
And that's one thing that I would hear from my family that read it. They go, "This is so wonderful, Dad. You should publish it," or "This is so wonderful. This is great. I love this book." And I'm like, "You're my daughter. You've got to say that, you know. You're my wife. You've got to say that, you know." But I would hear that from them, and then I started hearing that from other people that this is really good. You should publish it. And I'm like, I don't even know the first thing about publishing, and I was at a loss. To tell a quick story on that, I had the book. I didn't separate the book before. It was one big long book, and I took it to a place in Salt Lake City. I said, "Here's my book," and anyway, they told me a couple of days later, "So you can come pick up your book, or we can shred it here, whichever you want." You know, like, "Did you read it? Because it really, you know, is a good book," stuff like that. But I didn't prepare myself to have it prepared for them in a way that they would even want to read it. But that was just my own ignorance of not knowing. But when I heard back from them, then I was like crushed. And I shouldn't have been crushed, because it was me that really messed up, you know, on that. And then I went to Amazon and tried to do that myself. But even at that, there's like I told you, Ashley, I'm a writer. I'm not a publisher. I don't want to be a publisher. I don't want to mess with that. I don't want to have to think about that. I would much rather write and turn it over to you, and then you do that end of it. Big weight off my shoulders on that. Not that I can't learn how to do that. I just have no desire to learn how to do that.
Well, and your time is better spent writing book 5 than learning how to publish book 1.
Yes, and I did. And with my first cover of the book was, I went through so much time and effort getting that I had the book ready, and a year had passed by, and I still haven't gotten a cover for it. And I had this person and that person, and it just was a mess. It was costly, and time-wise, major costly, because I was a year and a half to 2 years behind.
Just because of the cover.
Just because of the cover.
Yeah, I remember when you told me that story, my heart just broke for you. I was like, oh, that is just the biggest headache in the world.
And then when I was introduced to you, and that's the first thing that you said, well, the first thing we need to do is get better covers. And I'm going, that'll be another 2 years, you know. Right. But again, that should have been taken out of my hands a long time ago, to somebody who knows what they're doing. Would have saved me a lot of time and money. And actually, of the 4 books that you did, I got all 4 of those less than what I got one for the others.
Oh, with like printing costs?
Yeah, no.
Just the cover.
For the cover.
Yeah, I know. I just was talking with another client the other day who had spent like over $500 for an illustration, just one illustration. I was like, I got my whole entire children's book for less than $500, all the illustrations in the book. And it's definitely, you've got to know how to work the system to be able to get that and find the quality people who can do it. But
right, it's the connections and the resources. And
yeah, that network and knowing how to, yeah. Well, and I think, you know, you touched on another really important point of, I love what self-publishing has done for authors, that you don't have to go wait for somebody to, a big traditional publishing company, to give that stamp of approval and say like, yeah, your book's worth publishing.
right.
And or to hear back from them of like, should we shed your book? And that, like, there's so many books and so many stories that have gone untold throughout the centuries because there was this process, this like gatekeeper in the traditional publishing world of saying, you know, your book is worthy of being published. And so I love what Amazon and other print on demand companies have done that allow people to just tell their story and to find the people willing to read it who want those stories and are going to read those stories. But the benefit the traditional publishing companies have is that they have this whole entire system and lots of people within their company who are all fulfilling these different roles, and whether it's the book cover or the editing or the marketing or like all the different little steps and the formatting and all the things. And so authors have this new freedom to write and publish whatever they want, but then they also have this responsibility fall on their shoulders of, if you want to publish your book, you've got to replicate the publishing industry if you want to do it successfully, because there's lots of people who just upload books all the time that are not great. Or maybe they're great but they don't have a great cover on them. Then people do judge a book by its cover. And so that has been kind of where we've come in of like, we want to give you all the benefits and the freedom and the creative liberty that come with self-publishing, but all the support that comes from a traditional publishing company of like, we've got the systems in place, we have the people in place. But like, I was thinking about when you were explaining the editing process for you, if you were working at a traditional company, you would be going in with an agenda and you would be going back to Terrance saying, if you don't cut this or if you don't change this, well, you're not publishing your book. Or like, this doesn't target this audience the way that our publishing company wants to target the audience. Or it doesn't target the audience that our publishing company has. So you have to mold your book to fit our company
standards.
There's not enough sex in this book. You need to have that. I don't want that. Well, then we don't want your book.
And I've talked to so many authors who were just like heartbroken that they had to take things out of their book because the publishing company said so. And like,
or
change
like, their characters, like, you know, just change everything that they kind of had envisioned, the cover, the title, you know, just everything that they've put their heart and soul into in order to fit.
Well, that was with my first book. I didn't get any I didn't get any say in what the cover looked like. And so when I sell it now, I'm just like, well, I didn't pick that cover, just so you know. But it is kind of this tough situation that you're in of like, well, do I wait for a traditional publishing company to give me that stamp of approval and then take on all the responsibility and costs of publishing it for me, or do I do it all myself and try and figure it out? And so,
which can be daunting. It's
really daunting.
Another thing too that I've learned is the first time author has everything going against them. If I had written, 30 other books and had them published, I could have wrote a piece of garbage and they would have taken it and put it into a book. And they've done that, with others. But a first-time author, regardless of how good your book is, it's really, really hard to get in
anywhere.
Yeah,
even if you're self-publishing, you've got to build a following and find out how to find readers and get reviews and all those things. And it gets easier the more you do it.
It's true.
Or it should.
If you're doing it the right way. You're doing it right.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I think we've covered a lot of ground do you have anything else that you want to add to the story? Or
Well, I will tell that the story is, you've heard that it's good and stuff like that, but I really honestly think that the story can be kind of like a self-help book, in knowing that things, that you have control over yourself, and that you can, it's up to you to make good and wise choices. It's up to you to figure out whether you're going to tell the lie or not tell the lie, and are you okay with whatever consequences that come. This book can help you at least see in a different light of some of those things that you come up with in life. And I'm not saying that Cobb did everything right, because Cobb didn't do everything right. He learned some lessons the hard way. But it's a book that can give you encouragement. And it is a love story. It is intrigue. There is a little bit of everything in this book that I think anybody, regardless of their age, and I know this to be true, I've had people in their 80s that have read it, that love it as much, if not more, than those that are 13 and 14 that have read it, and they love it as well. So,
well, and that kind of brings it back to the story you told us at the beginning of, you didn't start reading until when you were recently married, of like, I love that about reading and books, of just that it doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are. If it's a good story, it's a good story. And there are lessons to be learned in it and worlds to explore from it. So that's,
Yeah.
I love that. Well, and I forgot I was going to share this story too, of after we redid the covers, I showed it and sent it to a bunch of people, and one little girl responded back. She said, "You can't show me a cover like that and not let me read the book."
Right.
It definitely, working on that cover with you and being able to show what's in the book. I just remember when the light comes out of the book of knowledge, and Cobb is seeing that for the first time. It just captures like the essence of that story, of just like, here is all of this amazing, wonderful, exciting things that are going to happen, that there's so much to come, there's so much in it, there's so much to discover in this book. So
Yeah.
I do get a comment a lot of like, how did you come up with this kind of stuff? How did you think of things, and how did you put that all together? And honestly, I don't know the answer to that, but it came together, and it those ideas, I don't know where they really came from. It's a fiction book that's really not a realistic science fiction, I guess would be a good way to put it. There are some things in there that really were not that advanced, but there's a lot of things in there that could happen real soon. So.
Yeah, because some of it could happen really soon. But it's like it has the stuff in there that is advanced, and some things that aren't.
The part in there that I had written about where they would talk to the TV and say, "Walt, do this." I wrote that before that was possible.
these stories, like the creative process, is so fascinating to me, because so many people have talked about, like, well, it just kind of was this like out of body experience, or like it just came through me, or like it just happened. That creating is this incredible process, and process of discovery, and like all these things happen, but we have to be the ones willing to sit down and like put pen to paper, or fingers to the keyboard, of like, you don't know what's going to happen until you sit down and begin to create. And I think that's such a fascinating part of the creative process, of Like we bring things into creation, but then they have a life of their own. But it isn't until we sit down to create them that they like take on that life and then move forward. It's cool.
Yeah. And what an amazing thing to leave for your children and grandchildren. Like that is just such a cool thing that you imagined it, but also that a lot of it's, could be possible, could happen in several years. And just that is so relatable. And like you said, it's like teaching without preaching. Like the fact that they can relate and know that they can overcome hard things, just like Cobb, and that they can learn and grow, and that that knowledge can help them through life. And
Well, thank you so much for coming on and
I appreciate
sharing
it
your
very
story.
much.
Been so fun to work with you over this past, what has it been like? Not quite a year.
Yeah.
I think it was like December, January that we started working together, and this fun journey of discovering the world of under.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very grateful and thankful for all that you guys have done, because it's been a big weight off of my shoulders to not have to think and worry about that. And another thing that I really like about the two of you is I honestly feel comfortable, and I trust you with what you've been doing. And I know that I wouldn't say that about everybody. Of trust. Trust is a hard thing to earn from people. And anyway, you've gained my trust in this, and thank you.
Thank you for trusting us.